Hi everyone, this is Pastor Joe, and today we will be taking a look at Nehemiah chapter 3. If you have already read chapter 3 of Nehemiah, you may have felt, as I did when I first read it, that this is one of the most painfully boring chapters of the Bible. There are a lot of names and a lot of locations, so it is difficult to get excited about someone describing how a wall was built. But what's going on here, and why is this in Nehemiah? First of all, in Nehemiah 2:18 we read, "They, the Jews, priests, nobles, officials, and others, replied, 'Let us start rebuilding.' So they began this good work." Nehemiah chapter 3 is the response of the people's declaration to start rebuilding. It was the beginning of the good work of rebuilding the wall by the Jews, priests, nobles, officials, and others. One of the questions that chapter 3 mainly answers is this: what was repaired and rebuilt, and who was involved? Let me pause here and offer a Bible study tip for this week before we go into the chapter. A Bible study tip I would recommend is to utilize Bible maps and diagrams, which are commonly found in your Bibles or on the internet. There are many useful reference tools for those times when the Bible cites a lot of different places, like in Acts, when Luke lists cities and areas that Paul traveled to in his missionary journeys, or when a series of kings are listed in 1st and 2nd Kings. Or in this case, a diagram or map is useful when Nehemiah is describing a gate or an ancient wall that has many parts. So that is the Bible study tip of the week. Use Bible maps and diagrams. Why was this wall and its gates important for the Jews? As we learned in our first session, it wasn't just the wall that was of particular importance to the returning Jews, but it was the restoration of the temple, the city of Jerusalem, and the wall. The wall was the final piece for the returning exiles. Of the walls and gates mentioned in chapter 3, Mervyn Brenneman writes, "Despite its mundane appearance, this chapter is more than a construction record. Although the walls and gates would serve a military purpose, the book's concern for separation from pagan influence suggests it also had symbolic significance. Rather than simply providing security, the walls encouraged in the people of God a sense of identity and distinctiveness. Their restoration also represented a reversal of the humiliation of defeat and destruction suffered because of Israel's sin. Like the restored temple, the rebuilt walls would assure the Jews of God's redemptive presence among them." As archaeologists have uncovered, this wall was about 2.5 miles long, about 40 feet high, and about 8 feet thick. With a wall this size, who was going to build the Wall of Jerusalem? This chapter shows that Nehemiah was an outstanding organizer and leader. 45 sections of construction are mentioned, including 10 gates. For Nehemiah, planning all this building activity, organizing the groups of people, plus arranging the infrastructure to supply materials was no small accomplishment. Also, over 10 areas and regions of Judah are mentioned in this chapter, including Jericho, Tekoa, Gibeon, Mizpah, Maranoth, Jerusalem, Zanoah, Beth Hakerem, Beth Zur, and Keilah. Scholars believe these areas give us information of the existing border of Judah at the time. In addition to the areas from where people came, Nehemiah mentioned 8 to 9 different kinds of occupations, including priests, perfume makers, goldsmiths, rulers and half-rulers, Levites, temple servants, guards, and merchants. Again, organizing and mobilizing this varied group of workers from different areas of Judah was no small task. What kind of skill and gifting do you think Nehemiah had? How would you have organized these people? The gates of a city wall are particularly important because it is the entry point and exit points of a city, and most likely where an enemy would attack. Therefore, the gates had to be strong, fortified, and in some cases, well guarded. The gates were some of the most important parts of a wall. When we first read chapter 3, the names and the order of the walls might seem random at first. But if we look at a diagram of the wall of Jerusalem, we see that Nehemiah was not so random. He begins with the sheep gate in the north, and then described the building and repair and the people who worked on them counterclockwise. We see that Nehemiah described systematically, starting at the sheep gate and ending at the sheep gate. The sheep gate is located near the temple. It was named that because most likely that was the gate where people and shepherds brought in their flocks to sell and also to use for sacrifices. Now, who was assigned to help repair this part of the wall that was near the temple? Eliashib the high priest. The high priest is the chief religious figure in the temple. He alone was allowed to enter into the inner sanctum, or the Holy of Holies, on religious days like Yom Kippur and the Day of Atonement. Nehemiah begins the description of the rebuilding with Eliashib the high priest. This also serves as a clue as to how Nehemiah organized people. Eliashib dedicated and set the doors of the sheep gate in place as far as the Tower of the Hundred. The hundred here may refer to 1. Its height, which was 100 cubits, a unit of measure, or 150 feet, or 2. The number of its steps, or 3. A military unit. This tower, along with the Tower of Hananel, mentioned next by Nehemiah, were used for protecting the vulnerable northern part of Jerusalem. Next we have the fish gate. It is believed that there was probably a fish market there at one time, which is where it got its name. Next was the Yeshana gate, or the gate of the old city. This was where the elders of the city would meet to discuss matters of community importance and issue judgment on disputes. Next was the broad wall, so called because it measured more than 20 feet. This wall may have been necessary due to the influx of refugees fleeing from the fall of Samaria in 722 to 721. The next section is the Tower of the Ovens. As its name suggests, the Tower of the Ovens probably had an oven, which was most likely used for either firing pottery or baking bread. Next we have two gates, the Valley Gate and the Dung Gate, that were rebuilt by the same group of people. I probably would not have wanted to work on the Dung Gate. This gate was most likely where the refuse and garbage of the city was taken out and down to the valley of Hinnom, where it would be burned. Next we have the Fountain Gate, located near the Pool of Shiloh, and was often used by people to cleanse themselves before proceeding to the temple. The Pool of Shiloh and the Fountain Gate was located by the King's Garden in the city of David, which was the castle and palace that King David built. The next big gate mentioned was the Water Gate. This gate led down to the Gihon Spring adjacent to the Kidron Valley. This was most likely the distribution center for fresh water for Jerusalem. Next to the Water Gate was the Horse Gate. This gate was close to the king's stables, and the men of Jerusalem would ride their horses in and out of this gate in times of war or battle. Next is the East Gate, located on the opposite side of the Mount of Olives. Remember all those times when Jesus took his disciples to the Mount of Olives? This was most likely the gate facing it. Then we have the muster gate, or the inspection gate. Traditionally, this was the gate where King David would meet his troops to inspect them. And after the muster gate, we have a couple of more towers, and then back to the sheep gate. Though it seems mundane and laborious to read, this chapter is more than a construction record. As you read and study this chapter, keep in mind the variety of gates and walls as they were rebuilt by a variety of people and occupations. What did it look like for all these different people to work on the wall? When you read of the different gates and walls mentioned, what kind of picture do you get of Jerusalem? What was of importance and priority to the Jews? Well, that's it for chapter 3. Thanks for watching.